Hi, it's Ashleigh from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and welcome back to my channel where I make a lot of cake and cookie decorating tutorials as well as give a lot of baking business tips. And welcome back to another day of Vlogmas. Now, of course, since Christmas is fast approaching and I am now on winter holiday officially, I have been binge watching Wednesday. Now, don't worry, there's not going to be any spoilers in this video. We're just going to jump right into the tutorial. So I decided to do a little bit of a cuter take on the cookies. And yes, I do end up adding a smile on the end to Wednesday, but you can of course omit that if you would like to. We're going to start off with this heart here, and I'm using pipe and flood consistency for this entire heart. Now, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, you can check out this royal icing tutorial where I show you what pipe and flood consistency means, and I show you how to create the perfect pipe and flood consistency for your cookies so that you get that nice flat icing on top. Now, my royal icing recipe is nothing special. It's 1 cup of icing sugar or powdered sugar, also referred to as confectioner's sugar, to 1 tablespoon of meringue powder, and then you just add as much water as needed. And always make sure to give your royal icing a really good whip. You can also use raw egg whites for this. Really, any royal icing recipe that you like to use will do. I'm just basically showing you how to execute all of those ideas. Now, people really like to work with different types of consistencies, so if you like to work with one that kind of settles down in a few more seconds, then work with that. I personally like it when it's a little bit slow on settling in. Some people like it when it's really, really loose, but I just find that sometimes it means that it's going to drip off of the cookie. Now, for here, I'm using piping consistency, and I'm just kind of brushing this out. This is because this is going to be Wednesday's iconic dance dress. Now, truthfully, I couldn't find a very clear picture of it, and I didn't want to go back onto Netflix to run through it and see what I could see on my screen. So I just kind of went off of a not so great quality picture. And at the top there, she has that lace that's see-through on top. So I'm just going to brush that on to give that illusion of lace. And then for the rest of the dress here, it's fairly blocked out with color. It does have ruffles on it, but we're going to add those on later. If I tried to do the ruffle directly on here, then obviously we would see the color of the cookie showing through, and we want it to be completely black. This was definitely my favorite outfit of hers, but of course nothing trumps her classic dress, and this was shown in basically every single version of the Addams Family. I've seen this iconic dress. So we're just going to go really, really simplistic with this, making sure to fill it all in with the black icing. And by the way, to get this royal icing very, very black, I kind of went with more of a charcoal this time around just to give it that kind of, I don't know, like a kawaii feel. But if you want it to have very, very jet black tones to it, just add a lot of royal icing and let it set a little bit and then whip it back up, and you will get that jet black color. I'm just doing all of the parts right now in pipe and flood consistency that don't actually touch. It's really, really important that when you're using pipe and flood consistency, if you don't want the colors kind of meshing in together and you want to create different variations of texture on your cookie, then you need to let the layers dry in between before adding a color that's maybe very close to the other part of the pipe and flood consistency that you've created. So see here, I've got space between my dress and her face. So it's totally okay to put this on together. And then I'm going to dehydrate the royal icing just so that it hardens up a little bit. If you want to know more about dehydrating royal icing on cookies, then go ahead and check out this video in the right-hand corner. Now, remember when I talked about not to worry if the lines weren't super straight on this part? It's because I'm going back in with piping consistency, which means it's a little bit thicker. I've added more meringue powder and I've added more icing sugar. Do about a couple of tablespoons of meringue powder and 1 tablespoon of icing sugar at a time to get it to that thick consistency. Remember, we don't want a paste that's super, super hard to pipe out and that's so dry that it won't stick to your cookie. We want something that's light and fluffy enough. It's not too tough on your hands, but it can also maintain its shape well. So adding more meringue powder is going to allow your piping consistency to maintain its shape while making sure that it's still comfortable enough for you to pipe. By the way, I know I mentioned this in every cookie decorating video, but in case you're new, I always use tipless piping bags now. Very, very rarely do I use like a number 2 or a number 1 metal tip. This is because I can achieve that delicate feel with my tipless piping bag. I can cut the hole to as big or as little as I need for my piping tip, and there are no clogs. So I highly recommend that you use tipless piping bags. You could have left this borderless. I thought it felt a little bit unfinished, so I'm going to be adding this really, really simple beaded border all the way around. And again, make sure that you're doing this with piping consistency. It will not work with pipe and flood consistency. So notice here that I added in that neck afterwards, because if I added it in right after I added her face on, then what would end up happening is it would meld all together and it would just look like a giant blob. So that is why we do that blocking technique. Now this specific meringue powder seems to get a little bit looser with time, and of course my white icing has been sitting there for a little bit. So I'm actually adding on a very, very small amount of this pipe and flood consistency in here, and I'm going in with my cookie scribe just to fill in those blanks. I don't want this overly thick here because as we know, with royal icing cookie decorating, you're adding layers upon layers. So where you can get away with adding a little bit less, it's always better. So I'm just going in here and I'm kind of filling it in with that cookie scribe. So I'm not putting in as much of that icing on there. And then of course, we're going to add on her hands. Now you could do this a more peachy tone. I just thought white because I always found that when I look at Wednesday, she's very pale looking. So I decided, since we're making this a little bit more cartoony and it's more of my cartoon take on Wednesday Addams, let's just go with the full white. And also, anytime I can avoid mixing a new color, I'm gonna do it. I decided to keep things really, really simplistic with the shoes here. So just adding the shoes on the bottom. Again, notice that the black next to it is perfectly dry already. Now with my dehydration technique, it's not going to get super dry through and through, but it's going to be dry enough that it's not going to all meld together. Now I'm taking my piping consistency to create her hair. Now, since I'm going off of the Netflix's Wednesday instead of the old school Wednesday, I'm doing her hairline a little bit different. And in order to create these braids, all I'm actually doing is I'm creating little hearts and I'm putting them all together. This is very reminiscent of when I do like a crochet cookie or a knitted cookie. I do the exact same technique. And this is why it's imperative for you to have piping consistency and not pipe and flood. If you try pipe and flood with this, you're never going to get those details. And I wanted to make her braids long, but not too long, because I feel like if you go any longer, it starts looking a little bit like Rapunzel. Now, when I was creating these cookies, a small part of me thought that I might leave her faceless. I've seen a lot of takes on it and it looks really cool. But since I was going more with the cutesy version, just the cookie cutter itself lends to that cutesiness. So I decided to go all the way with these really cute eyes. And you'll notice that I kind of just dotted on that white glint. I didn't pipe it on because I feel like that would have distributed too much white. And then I did give her a little smile. I just felt like she needed it. But I think honestly she might have looked cute without any mouth at all. I was so excited when I got to start working on this cookie. If you guys make cookie sets and you make lots of varieties of cookies, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about when I say I get excited to make certain ones. So this one here, I'm filling in her collar with pipe and flood consistency, and now we get to do that brushed technique. This is one of my favorite techniques to do if you are not very solid at piping and you just feel like you need more practice. This is going to make you feel so confident. If you have the right consistency of piping icing, then this is going to make your product just so nice afterwards. Really, you can't mess this up. All you're doing is you're doing some ruffles. You don't need to have a whole lot of control with it. And then you drag that paintbrush through. Some people like to dip the paintbrush in water. I like to leave my brush fairly dry. I find the bristles on my particular brush are nice and soft, so it doesn't end up taking off that royal icing completely. And then you're left with these beautiful ruffles. And we'll add more of those later on because, as we know, her whole dress is just ruffle central. And I love this part when she gets ready for the dance and she quickly puts those braids up. And it's just such a look. And so we did the braids backwards, of course. And then we're going to add on those little pieces of hair. She's got hair kind of dangling out really beautifully. I know I did not really describe that as beautiful as it is, but it's more like it's wispy, but she also has that kind of thick bang to it as well. So we're going to add in all of those little pieces coming out. And of course, we're giving her the exact same face as we gave our other cookies. I really like it when I'm doing sets and I make sure that all of them have uniform faces. I just think it looks really good and it kind of brings everything all together. And I'm giving her her little mouth as well. I thought it would be cool too if she had purple lips, but completely up to you. Yay, more ruffles. And it really does matter where you're placing these ruffles first. You want to make sure that you work your way out and then inward. So then that way the ruffles are facing the right way, because if you do it where you're starting, like if you started right by the armpit of her dress, then it's going to be harder for you to create those ruffles. So just make sure that you start your ruffles in the right place. And I am sorry for this horrendous angle, and it's exactly why we are going through this part really, really quickly. I just did a little projection of the Nevermore sign on here. Originally, I was going to do Wednesday, but it just kept not fitting on properly, so I decided to go with this. And I will often do this where I want to allude to something, but I don't want to do every single little detail. And this was my style very, very early on in my baking career, so I would often tell my customers that that's more so how I would go about doing characters and things like that. Now with this last layer of royal icing, I'm being really, really light. We already have a lot of royal icing underneath, so I'm just being really haphazard with those ruffles. And then of course I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to outline. For the end here, I did fill it in with pipe and flood consistency, but I did use a lot of that piping consistency for the detailing on the outside. This is just the cutest little set. I absolutely love the show. I definitely recommend it if you're into something a little bit dark, but it's also quirky and funny. I never really liked the Addams Family growing up, but I really, really did like this series. So definitely go and watch it. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial, and thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading every single day for Vlogmas, so be sure to come back tomorrow to see what I do. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye!